So this video is to accompany the creation of Bessie the Hawksbill turtle, originally designed for the Conservationists subscription and made here in stone and cocoa. But what I've done is I've remade in oatmeal and chestnut, and I'm just going to take you through a few of the specifics of the patterns and then the sewing up, so you feel quite confident putting it together when you approach the end. So what you will have made is quite a lot of bits to put together. I'm not going to lie, here they all come. So it's quite a lot of little bits of sewing that then we crochet a lot of the parts together rather than sew them up. So what I'm going to start with is here I've got the underbelly in oatmeal and then the top shell in chestnut. And what is confusing when you first look at this design is trying to work out where this bit is. This bit actually sits underneath these shell panels that you sew on at the end. So it looks like you don't use a lot of that dark contrast colour, but this piece actually sits underneath. So once you've made the two pieces, you can remove your stitch markers because you're not going to need any of those anymore, and that might cause confusion. And instead we're going to use these centralizer points in order to line them up. So you place a centralizer point on the top piece and a centralizer point on the bottom piece. Line those up together like that, and then what you're going to do is double crochet around the edge from the top down. Now, just to clarify, the top is the dark, the underbelly is the light. You've got the two things together, and I've also made sure that I've got the right sides facing. So your wrong sides will be the sides with your ends that look messier. It's the spiraling outsides, your right sides, that you need to have facing outwards on both pieces, and then double crochet all the way around the edge. Then as you approach those last few stitches, get your stuffing ready because it's time to put the stuffing in before you close up those last few. And then break your yarn, and then you can sew in that end before we actually go on to the next step. Because what we're going to add now is a lovely frill around the edge of the shell, and this is because that is what their shells are like, is it's not a smooth edge. It has all of these lovely rippled kind of armoured edge to the shape of the shell. So that's what we're going to be adding now, is this edge around the outside. So we're going to be crocheting all the way around the edge of the shell. As a right-handed crocheter, I'm going to be crocheting this way around. So I'm going to be crocheting from the top down, slip stitching in line with my centralizer will be where I'm going to begin. As a left-handed crochet, you'll be starting from exactly the same place, but you're going to be going the opposite way around. So what you need to do is grab your yarn and chain 2 stitches, and then treble 1 into the same stitch. So go back into that same stitch, yarn over and through 2 loops, yarn over and through 2 loops. So that is the British treble stitch. Then we're going to half treble 1. So yarn round, in, through, you've got your 3 loops again, but this time yarn over and come through all 3 loops in one motion. So that is the British half treble next. Then DC, and then slip. And then using all of those stitches, follow the repeat in your pattern 5 times till you get round to the top. So chain 3, double treble, by which you wrap the yarn round twice in the same stitch, yarn over and through 2, and then through the final 2. Then once you've done the repeat, break yarn and miss 10 stitches. So look at the one that you've worked, which is that one there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches to there. And then we're going to rejoin, and we're also then going to carry on with a different pattern towards the back. So your best bet is to actually rejoin into your 10th. So put your hook into that 10th stitch and then and at the very end, you'll get back round to where you started, like that, with that final Didier one on the end. So that is the shell edging in place, which I think you'll find is a very satisfying thing to crochet. So I'm going to sew in my ends now. I'm going to keep my centralisers in, but I'm just going to sew in these ends so these are neat, because what we can actually do now is do our pentagons. So if you're like me, you'll have done all the crocheting first and done the sewing till the end. So what we're now looking for are all the pentagons that you have made like this. Now, I'm just going to talk through, quickly before I sew them on, I'm actually just going to talk through the theory of how you make them for anyone that might be new to crocheting. So what you need to do, I just want to recap the colour change so that you feel confident in that, is you do 5 into a ring to begin with. So chain 2 stitches, and then you're going to double crochet 5 into a ring. 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the 5th one, you'll need to swap to your lighter colour. This is the only advanced thing about this pattern, really. Everything else is really straightforward. The only slightly more challenging thing is keeping track of your colour changes when you're doing these tortoise shell pentagons. So swap to your other colour, and then you're actually going to half treble 2 into the next stitch in one colour, and then half treble 2 into the following stitch in the other colour. So you go yarn around your hook and into the stitch, yarn over to the point where you've got your 3 loops, and because it's a British half treble, we yarn over and we come through all 3 loops in one motion. So 1, back in, and then what you need to do is at the end of this half treble in this colour, you'll drop that colour and you'll actually finish that stitch off in the next one. So then I'll repeat that again. So you'll do 1, and remember that in your second half treble in that colour, you drop it and you return to your other one in order to get nice clean breaks. So then on to the next one, 1, and in the second one, at that point that you've got your 3 loops, drop that colour and return to this one. So we've done 1, 2, 3, 4. So the last set will be in 1, and then in the second one, you'll be swapping back onto your lighter colour, ready to then actually work into the dark one again to create that tortoise shell pattern. So I hope that helps. And the most important thing is to make sure that you're in the second stitch of one colour, you're setting up that colour change like we normally would in a colour change before you go on to doing the next one. So you've got your pentagons, and now let's sew them into position. So you've got an incomplete round at the end of them, which is what gives you this slightly longer tip. So what I'm going to do, whenever you make one, leave yourself a nice long edge like that, and I'm just going to put that needle through that last stitch like that to retain that longer edge, because that is they're going to go all facing with that longer edge facing downwards like that. So starting from this base, I'm going to remove my centralizer because I know that the middle of my top shell is between my 2 smaller ones at the back. Line up this pentagon into there so that that's facing on those. And just to sew them in place, all I'm going to do is just back stitch around, in and through. And you're going to be putting 4 down the back. So doing exactly the same thing that I just did. We'll be doing 2, 3, and then the 4th one on the top. Like that. Sewing this one into that front line. Then sew 3 each either side, starting from the bottom. Sorry, I nearly made my own error there. Starting from the bottom so that you can overlap those ends. When you get to putting the last few sections together, probably all I want to emphasise is a tortoise's shell or a turtle shell is obviously a very organic shape and texture. So don't try to worry too much about marrying them up perfectly. Just make sure you put those last few stitches in so that then your turtle shell is complete, so that you really get that impression of the tortoise shell across the top like that. So that's in, and it really, I mean, for me in this high contrast, it shows off that frill even more before we start to now do the sewing up. So when it comes to the head, what you need to do is pop your stuffing into the head like that, and then gather the front of that face before we actually crochet the beak on. So I think probably it'll be easiest to finish your head off and then sew it on afterwards. So what I would do is fold it flat like that, so you see where the front of the head is and where the back of the neck is, and just fold that together and then sew that closed, because that's, you're folding it, you're sewing it on, should I say, in a straight line. So there's no issue with putting it in like that. Then when it comes to putting on your eyelids, what you want to do is very much sew these in place like this. Now you can find it, some of you will find it easier sewing your eyes on than sewing your eyelids on, and others will find it easier vice versa. This really is personal preference, really. Probably easier if it's your first time to sew the eyes on first, which is what I'm going to do here, and then actually pop those eyelids on afterwards. So if you're doing it that way around, Obviously, you could leave the eyelids off if you prefer the look of the turtle without the eyelids. They're not at all necessary. You could decide to just leave them off and have them like that. So that's the eyes in place. Let's pop an eyelid over the top. So when you've made these 2 semicircles, where you've done those last closing off stitches of crochet, you will have the V's of the stitches running across the top. They should form the top of the eyelid like that. So then hold it in place. Right, then when it comes to crocheting the beak along the front, we're going to crochet that directly in. By slip stitching in on the side of the face like that. And double crocheting directly into the fabric right the way across. In line with the eyelids. Then the last thing I just want to show you when it comes to sewing up the video is how to do the spots. So when it comes to adding the spots, obviously every turtle is totally unique and the markings are unique. So I've not stated specifically how to do the spots. This is where you can get quite creative. So I'll just show you what I would recommend. So when you're doing a spot, all you need to do is do your little 6 in a ring. So do your little magic rings, however you prefer to do a magic ring, but I would usually chain 2 stitches and then double crochet 6 into a ring. Like that. Leave yourself a nice long end of yarn. Don't make it too small, because what you're then going to be able to do is actually embroider the little markings like this with the yarn that's left over. So what I'd probably recommend is sewing all the pieces in place first before you start to add your markings. But I'll just show you how to do that. Is what you then do is decide where you would like that circle to be. Sew it into place with a few back stitches like that. And then leap to where you'd like to do a little spot as embroidery and just loosely wrap one for a little one if you want to, but I tend to find that 3 looks best. Just 3 little wraps around a stitch like that, and you've got a little spot to accompany the big one. And when you're putting the patches on, if you use your ends like that as you go, you'll find that you can then put these little ones in. Now, a big tip really, to make it look as organic as possible, try not to be too symmetrical. I know a lot of you out there will probably really want them to be symmetrical. I've made them match on both sides, if you see what I mean. So I've actually, the head is asymmetric, but then what I've done is where I've got one, I've tried to roughly, so they're a pair, I've got one there and I've got one there. But in terms of the distancing on each flipper, don't equi-space them. That's going to make it look really polka dot and regimented. Try and make sure you've got some closer together in clusters and some further apart. Obviously, if you're a person that finds that challenging, just use the picture to guide you. So make sure you use that top-down picture to guide you on where you're putting that positioning in place. But what I'm hoping is some of you might go wild and put even more in than I have done here to really see the different stitches. Obviously, you've got tons of extra yarn to do that. So I'm hoping that that gives you everything you need in order to put it together. I'll just give you a little bit of a view of the underside when it comes to sewing up. So your tail's going to go into the centre like that. You've obviously got your two back flippers, which are flat and not stuffed, that sit there like that. And then you've got a little bit of stuffing in these front two with the joints that go in between when you actually then do your sewing up for it to go together. And when you put that head in, you just sit it slightly under that colour change line like that. So you'd sew that neckline into that final colour change line, and obviously you've got a lovely nice gap in order to line that bit up. Same with the tail, you've got a lovely little gap to line that one up as well. Well, I hope you enjoy it. I can't wait to see the other colours that you make them in. I'm hoping some of you will go right out there and make them in lots of different colours. It's a really beautiful pattern that I hope you'll cherish for years to come, and I absolutely really enjoyed making it. I think I've made 2 turtles now and a tortoise, so it's quite exciting, and a terrapin, but each one is very unique in terms of its techniques and the finish.